inside, and that's because they eat a bunch of plants. Elephants eat grass and trees, but this time of the year, which is our summertime, we're at the end of our summer, mostly just grass. Have a look at that. And mostly coming out the same way that it went in, pretty much undigested. And these are just big compost balls. There's an insect that has been living inside here. That is a fruit chafer. And the reason why that insect is inside this piece of dung is because, being summer, there's a lot of fruit inside elephant dung that hasn't been digested, and that fruit chafer enjoys digging through elephant dung to eat all the fruit that hasn't been digested. Sounds yucky, eh? But it also means that we need to watch out. Elephants are fairly dangerous, especially when you're out here on foot in the African bush, and we have to watch out for elephant like this. So we need to test to see how fresh this particular elephant dung is, and a very good way of testing elephant dung is you stick your finger into it, you wait for all the juices to get onto your finger, and then you taste it. This elephant dung tastes like it's about 2 hours or so old. So it's lost its body heat and it's not warm anymore. It's cold still from last night. So this elephant isn't right here right now, but it doesn't mean that we don't need to be careful. And that's what we're going to be doing now. So over the next couple of minutes, while you're with us, next couple of hours or whatever, the next couple of minutes, we're going to be looking for this elephant and anything else around over here. You're off to James, who's got some leopard to show you.
Now, by moving south, Stef means that they are going onto the reserve just next door to ours, so we can't go where they are going. I'm just going to move slightly so we can get a better view of them. Oh, they're playing now. I managed to get you right behind a tree there. That was brilliant on my part. There we go. Well, leopards eat meat of it if they're little. I think he's just seen his mother. You can't really see us at the moment. How's that, Craig? Sorry about that, everybody. Manhay, they eat meat. We have 9 species of antelope here, and they will take the small to medium-sized ones. So something called steenbok and duiker and impala would make up the bulk of their diet. But leopards have what we call a very Catholic diet, which means that they're able to eat just about anything. They will eat anything from lizards to fish to frogs to termites sometimes, and of course all the way up to things the size of wildebeest, which are very large antelope indeed. And Ray, you're wondering how big they get. Ray, they get to roughly, a big male will get to about 85 kilograms, sometimes up to 90 if he's massive. Female, sort of 45 kilograms is a relatively large one. We think that their mother weighs between 35 and 40 kilograms or so. So they're not enormous. But a big male, yeah, so I mean a big male about the size of a fairly large human male. And the female's a little bit smaller, mass-wise, than a female human being. And their height, I suppose, at the shoulder for a male would be roughly, say, 3 feet or so at the shoulder, about a meter. I keep forgetting you're in Hong Kong, so you're going to use, of course, the metric system, because unlike some parts of the world, you are not using the imperial system anymore. Alright, now this is a really good question from Ollie. Ollie, while we look at that leopard, you're saying, how do you tell the difference between a leopard, a jaguar, and a cheetah? Well, a leopard and a jaguar have very similar shaped spots or rosettes. And this, if you look at a jaguar's rosettes or arrangements of spots, so we call them rosettes because the spots are formed in a circle around a sort of discolored or copper-colored center. And if you were to look at a jaguar, you'd find that that rosette is much larger, and the actual animal itself is much larger. Well, not much larger, but they're probably about 10% bigger than leopards. And they occur, of course, only in South America. So if you were to find something that looked like a leopard in South America, you would know immediately that it was a jaguar. Then a cheetah is a very different build. So jaguars and leopards build very stockily. They are very powerful. They're quite short, and they're very muscular. A cheetah, much less so. A cheetah is taller, much more slightly built, and they have got spots on them, not those rosette shapes. So you can see the spots on the front of his chest there. That's what a cheetah's got, but all throughout the body. They don't have that rosette arrangement of spots. And they've all got a much smaller head, much less in the way of muscle definition, because they are totally over-specialized for speed, which means they cannot, like the leopard, make do with just about anything to eat. They do not have the Catholic diet of the leopards. They must eat pretty much only small to medium-sized antelopes, and they catch them, of course, by chasing them at great speed. Let me just move out the way here for this chap to go past. Sorry about that. So let me just move a little bit forward here. So I hope that answers the question. The snow leopard would be all right, so we also, sorry about that everyone, but of course, like I was saying, those are not the only 3 spotted cats you get. Snow leopards and clouded leopards would be 2 others, but the snow leopard is relatively closely related to these chaps, and of course lives up in the Himalaya and various other, well, mountain fastnesses in Eurasia. Highly endangered. Then we had a question about where they live, or what climate they live in, and that's from Matthew. And Matthew, the climate leopards live in goes all the way from the Mediterranean climate of the southern Cape of South Africa, where they have a winter rainfall and summer more heat, temperatures up to sort of 38 degrees sometimes in the height of the summertime. And then they'll go all the way up to here, where we have very hot and relatively wet summers. Sort of gets to about 42 degrees here every so often, but then they extend all the way up through Africa, through the central rainforest regions, into the deserts of Arabia. They used to extend all the way into Europe as well. Obviously they've been excluded from that part of the world now. Then they extend all the way across Asia, down into India, and eventually across to the Amur region of Russia, in the far east of Russia, where it's obviously freezing cold in the wintertime. Now that's the same species of leopard all the way, different subspecies, so a slight variation, but they could absolutely interbreed with each other. And so they extend all the way from the blinding heat of the Arabian desert, where they're much smaller than they are here. The males probably only weigh 30 to 35 kilograms, like the females here, all the way across to the freezing coldnesses of the far east of Russia. Now you're wondering, Gordon, where we are here. We're sitting in the northeastern corner of South Africa. I don't think I told you that at the beginning, did I? Northeast corner of South Africa, which of course is the southern tip of the African continent, and we're in a place called the Kruger National Park, and that of course is one of the most famous national parks in all the world. Here we have the little female. Xongile is her name, which means the beautiful one. Startlingly original name, that. And she is heading off into the bushes to try and stay hidden. And I wonder, you know, we drove past this area earlier this morning and we failed to see them. So I think you can see how easy it would be for her to hide. And Sean, while the spots of that gorgeous animal just disappear there in amongst the heads of the guests, let's go back to the young male. Sean, you say, how long do they live for? A little bit like our own species, males live for not quite as long as females. The males live probably till they're about 14 years old as the oldest male on record in this area. And the females can live up to about 18 years. I think potentially in captivity they would live to 20 or so. But very few animals out here die of old age. Once it becomes difficult to hunt and difficult to eat, well, then of course the animals are going to eventually drop dead from starvation, or they will be attacked by other predators. And that's the sad, well, not sad thing, but it is an inevitable fact of life out here, that once you get old and you become infirm or unable to move around too much, something is going to get you. Now I can hear way off to the distance, I can hear some squirrels going, and that normally means that they've spotted something that might be wanting to eat them, and I suspect quite strongly that the mother of these two cubs is coming towards them. Ray, you're wondering how many types of leopards there are in this area. There's only one type, and that is the African leopard. That's this one here, and that's, I mean, there's actually only really one type of leopard the world over. Yes, there are different variations, different subspecies. We only have one subspecies here, and that's the African leopard out here. I wonder if it wouldn't be worth our while just popping down the road there to see if we can't see if the mother isn't coming this way. Let's have a look-see. Tuleka, you say, will the leopards not harm us? No, Tuleka, clearly they won't. Like I say, they are used to our presence in vehicles. Now, that's not to say that they're not dangerous at all, or they're not potentially dangerous. If you irritate one of them enough, and certainly their mother has been known to do this, they do what we call charge, which means they'll come rushing at you as in a warning to say, go away. If you don't heed that warning, then yes, they can become potentially dangerous. But they do not see human beings, either on foot or in vehicles, as something to eat. They just don't see us as prey. They see us, excuse me, they see us as a kind of presence that they don't really worry about. And why they don't worry about us? Well, it's because they don't associate us with something to eat, and normally, actually, they associate human beings with they associate human beings with a threat. They see us as a predator, not as prey. Because we, of course, have evolved in Africa, which makes us, we evolved as a predator in Africa. So most animals see us as a threat. Now, Ian, apparently you have asked a question, but I'm afraid I've missed what it was because I was looking for the mother. What is it again, please? Oh, Ian, you want to know how many leopards it will take to take down a large animal. Ian, leopards don't hunt in groups. They live on their own. They're solitary animals, except when they're young. So these guys are young. They're about to go independent. So between 18 months and 2 years, they will become independent of their mother. And then they hunt on their own. So when you say how many leopards would it take to take down a large animal, there really isn't an answer for that question, because they don't hunt like that. They don't hunt in groups. That said, we have seen, we've seen evidence, certainly when these leopard's mother and their father was in the process of mating. We saw them eating, so we didn't see them kill it, but we did see them eating a young buffalo. Now that's quite unusual because that's quite big for a leopard. The biggest animal out here that I've seen a young male leopard or a male leopard killing was in fact a wildebeest, which is a fairly large ungulate. Wasn't an adult, but probably weighing in let's say weighing in roughly 130 or so kilograms. And the biggest one I've seen a female with is probably an adult male impala weighing about 70 kilograms or so. Let's go back to the cubs. I couldn't see the mother there. She might pitch up at some stage here. Now if we can't get a good view of the cubs, we'll move on and see what else we can see. I know there was a hippo not too far from here. Alright, Stefan has managed to find a very nice plant to show you, so I'm going to give you one last look at the leopard cub, and then we're going to go and see if we can't find a hippopotamus, while you go over to discover some of the wonders of the flora with Stef.
There's a wonder of a flora. Thank you very much, James. This is a plant that I quite enjoy. This is a plant called a Waltheria plant. Now, what we use Waltherias for out here is you pull them up by their roots, or you pull their roots out, you crush their roots, or you wash them and then you crush their roots up, and then you boil the roots in some water, and it makes for a wonderful tonic to drink. You can't drink a lot of it. It doesn't taste that nice, like any good thing for you, like medicine. Tastes a bit bitter, and but it really is good. Good antioxidant, anti-fungus, antibacterial. It's even a little bit of an antidepressant. So this tree is actually quite important. This little bush is quite important. But that's not why I stopped here. I stopped here because there's a puzzle for us to work out here in the bush. Apart from how I am going to get rid of the 400 million flies that are infesting me at the moment. But that's another story for another day. Here we have the remains. Well, I actually think it's not the remains at all, but I actually think that that is the supper of a spider. There's a web here, and spiders generally wrap up the food that they catch in their web in silk like this, and they larder it. It means to store, and the spider would have stored this particular food to use at a later stage, but I cannot for the life of me find the spider. So I think the spider's actually been eaten by something. Now, the only thing that really eats spiders out here are birds. So I think what's happened is a bird has come along, seen the spider sitting in her web, and simply just plucked the spider off and gobbled it down. Because I really cannot find any trace. Now, sometimes spiders will hide underneath the leaves of bushes and plants. In this particular case, missing in action, unfortunately, and quite nice to show you. But nevertheless, is one of those things. Come and have a look at these flies. This is a stable fly. Let me see if I can hold it still. It's stiller than the wind, at least, anyway. So right here at the end of this grass, this is what's plaguing us at the moment. This one is nice and fat because it's full of blood. They suck blood. And I must have at least 100 of these flies buzzing around me as we speak. If you don't shush them away, disturb them, then they bite you and they leave a nasty bump. Can't really do anything to you. They're not the dreaded tsetse fly of a little bit further north of here. The tsetse fly is a type of horsefly that bites you and can give you a sickness called sleeping sickness, which is not something that you want to catch out here. It won't kill you. It's not as bad as malaria is anyway, but nevertheless, all good. I do carry around a fly swatter. This one's looking a little bit abused. It's made from a plant called an osomum plant. And for years, this plant has been used as a natural fly repellent because of a lovely smell that it gives off. There's an oil in here that flies find repellent. I find it quite nice. It's got a nice basil-y smell. And I beat myself about the shoulders and on the head vigorously to release the smell of the plant, but in the same time also to try and kill as many of these flies as I can. while we're busy walking in the bush and I'm trying not to get myself eaten by anything. Now, Vic asked me if there's any endangered species in the area. Vicky, bush and I'm trying not to get myself eaten by anything. Now, Vic asked me if there's any endangered species in the area. Vicky, you a live TV show all the way from the southern tip of Africa in a massive wilderness area, and from time to time the signal gets stuck on its way to you. But now I can answer that question that you asked about the endangered species. We do have endangered species over here. We have wild dogs, we have cheetah, and we've got a bunch of smaller things, but I'm going to let James answer that question for you. He's just found some hippo.
We're looking at a patch of water, everybody, where you might just be able to spot, within the next minute, one of Africa's most iconic animals. And this one is a very shy version of that iconic animal, and you can maybe see the wind sweeping across the surface of the water. But in here, eventually it'll stick. There it comes, is a hippo. And he's a bit nervous when we're not really sure why, because often they will just sit exactly like he's sitting, with their heads above the water like that. But this chap is a little bit nervous, and every time I sort of move the vehicle, he quickly puts his head under the water. And that's how they say stay safe. Now, you were asking about danger, a few of you, wondering if the leopards would attack us and why they don't attack us. And interestingly, one of the most dangerous animals, if you like, in Africa is the hippo. And they actually kill more people in Africa than any other animal. Now, I believe Stef was answering a question for you when he lost a bit of picture. I'm going to ask for that question again, and I'll see if I can't help answer what he was answering. Are there any endangered animals in the area? Yes, there are, absolutely. And more so, sadly. They're not endangered here specifically. For example, those leopards are not endangered in this area. There's a very healthy population, but they are becoming increasingly endangered the world over. The most obvious or iconic endangered animal that we have here is the African wild dog. And the African wild dog also has a relatively healthy population here, but throughout the world, very endangered indeed. Probably about 3,500 of them left, maybe up to 4,000 or so. So very few wild dogs left in the world, and most of them up in Tanzania, in the Selous. But you know, all throughout the world, animals are becoming more and more threatened by human activities. A little while back, there were well over 100,000 lions on the African continent. In fact, probably as little as 30 years ago. Now there are fewer than 20,000 of them. That's not a lot. If you think of the number of people there are in Hong Kong alone, and you think how small Hong Kong is in comparison with some of the wilderness areas here, you can see that, well, 20,000 is just a minute amount. It's probably the size of maybe 2 city blocks in a place like Hong Kong. Even elephants are having a rough time. And then, of course, rhino. There are rhino here, black rhino, highly endangered, white rhino, likewise, becoming more and more endangered as human beings kill them. Ray, you're wondering about how long a hippopotamus can stay under the water. I'm told about 8 minutes. But I've never seen a hippo stay underwater for anything like that long. Normally, it's actually only about 20 seconds or so, and then they come up and breathe and go back down again. I've definitely seen a hippo stay under for as long as a minute, but it's very seldom that they will do that. And they don't, you know, that hippopotamus is not treading water, he's standing on the bottom. And so they're not actually swimmers. people will say hippo can't swim. That makes it sound like they're drowned, but they don't. They don't float, you see. So they walk along the bottom of the water, and then they sort of push up, and then breathe. And James, you were wondering about whether or not hippos can swim. No, they do struggle to swim because they're just a bit heavy. They're a bit dense. Well, that doesn't mean that they can't move in deep water. They just jump up and push up to the surface of the water when they want to breathe. Okay, let's move on from this hippo. I think we've had enough of him. The leopards have gone south, so let's see what else we can find around here. Ray, you're wondering what an impala is. Well, that's a very good question, of course. I was talking about them in the context of what leopards eat. An impala is the most common antelope that we get out here. We get 9 different species of antelope, and an impala is the most common one of those. And one hates to guarantee that we'll see one, because so often when you make those sorts of guarantees, it doesn't happen. But there's a very, very good chance that we will see an impala fairly soon. I wonder where we should go. Let's go this way. We'll see if we can find you some impalas. And I'd also quite like to show you an elephant, because the elephants have been around a lot lately, and they really are quite fun to see. So let's move along. We're going to move along relatively quickly on our little morning safari here. I guess it must be afternoon in Hong Kong. Can somebody tell me what the time is there? And who knows what we're going to see around the next corner, obviously. And it's 1:15 in the afternoon, so you've probably either just had or are going to have your lunch after this. That'll be quite nice. And I mean, I cannot imagine a more different environment from the one that I live in. An enormous city, of course, and for me most famous for the Hong Kong Rugby Sevens, but obviously that's not what it's the most famous for. It's a huge site of commerce, lots and lots of people and buildings and technology, some of the world's most sophisticated technology, and yet you've now been transformed to where I live, which is a complete wilderness area. Very little in the way of infrastructure and buildings and that sort of thing. Let's go up this way, because I did see some impala around here a little bit earlier. And all the time we're looking around, perhaps we might see an interesting bird, an interesting tree, an interesting flower, an interesting insect. And I think Stef is having a little bit of trouble with his pack at the moment, so we're going to be on our own. Bryson, you want to know what the smartest animal in the world is? Well, while we look at a gorgeous flower there, I will tell you. Bryson, the smartest animal in the world, you might be surprised to know, is probably the human being. And while, yes, well, we all know some human beings who are not very smart at all, some human beings are distinctly unsmart. We are probably the smartest creatures in the world, and that's obviously because we have enormous brains in comparison with most creatures out here. Here's a beautiful hibiscus flower. Can you see this, Craig? I'll get onto that a little bit more for you, Brighton. And so we tend to think, I'm not going to pick it because it is a wild flower and it has, well, a right to be there, I suppose. We tend to think of ourselves as the brightest because we've developed wheels, obviously, and we've developed advanced technologies and various other things. And so that's the standard against which we judge other animals' intelligence. And I'm sure you didn't mean, you obviously know that human beings are supposedly the smartest in the world. You probably meant what's the smartest animal out here, other than a human being. And that's difficult to say, because all of the animals out here, of course, are as smart as they need to be to survive out here. So a leopard is very smart at catching prey, it's very smart at staying hidden, very smart at being territorial and marking its territory and being able to tell where all the other leopards in the area are. But if you give it a maths paper, it's going to fail, obviously. It can't speak. But but it doesn't need to speak and it doesn't need to be able to do maths to survive. We do these days. We have to have sophisticated language. We are physically very poor in comparison with all the other animals out here, which means we have to have this huge brain in order to be able to survive. Something like a baboon or a chimpanzee, well, they're a little bit closer to us in the way that their minds work and the way that their social structures work, which means that we tend to think of them as being smarter or cleverer, there's an impala up ahead, than something like a leopard or perhaps something like that impala. But in actual fact, all we're saying there is that the way it thinks, the way its brain works, is closer to the way our own brains work, and therefore we think of them as being smarter. This impala is hopeless at language. It definitely cannot add 1 and 1. Well, I don't think it can add 1 and 1, and if it could, it wouldn't be able to tell me about it, but it's perfectly intelligent for the job that it has to do to survive, and its job is to find grass to eat and to stay warm and then to mate. And Ollie, you're saying, how do different animals adapt in the safari? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I'm just going to quickly correct an impression, perhaps. This area is not called a safari. A safari is an East African term or Swahili word that means journey. And it's come to mean basically a game drive. So it's come to mean an exploration of a wilderness area. That's what a safari is now sort of used. When we use the term safari, that's what we mean. The area here would just be called the bush or the wilderness. So how do the different animals adapt out here in the wilderness? Well, they've all adapted over many millions of years. And that animal that you're looking at now, the impala, is one of the animals that has adapted the longest time ago. And some of their most important adaptations include the ability to eat leaves from trees and grass off the ground. Very few herbivores are able to do that. But Ollie, I mean, it's, that's a kind of question that we could spend years discussing. And it's important to understand that every creature out here that survives out here has, over the course of evolutionary time, so over millions of years, they have adapted to a certain way of life that is possible within the constraints of the area that they live. I hope that sort of kind of explains your question. If you want me to clarify that, just let me know. Well, Ian, yes, it is. You say, is an impala like a deer? It is to a certain extent. It isn't a deer, but it is like a deer, yes. They fill the same ecological function out here. So they are herbivores, and they provide food for some of the predators. And, well, what else do? They provide fertilizer for the bush. But in many ways, they are very like deer. They are ruminants, which means they're like cows. They rechew their food. They eat grass, and they perform that same function. Their differences, though, are that we don't actually get deer in Africa at all. We get antelope, and the antelope are slightly different, and the most obvious difference is that they don't lose their horns. So those horns are permanent, whereas a deer gets antlers, and they fall off every year. Ray, you say, how do you tell the difference between an impala and an antelope? Well, an impala is an antelope. An antelope is a family of different animals, and in this case it includes the impala, the wildebeest, the waterbuck, the steenbok, the duiker, the nyala, and the kudu, and the sable, and the bushbuck. Those are all the antelope that we get here. Those are the 9 species. And so you've got, an impala is an antelope in the same way that you might describe there being cats out here, right? So we know that there are cats out here. So you wouldn't say what's the difference between a leopard and a cat, because of course a leopard is a cat, and it's only one of a number of different cats that we get out here. If I said got deer out here, you'd say, well, what kind of deer do you get? Do you get white-tailed deer, or fallow deer, or reindeer, or any of the other kinds of deer that knock about the world? Caribou, for example. Now normally this time of year it's pretty hot, and the sun would have probably raised the temperature to around about 26 or 27 degrees Celsius so far, just before 7:30 in the morning, or just after 7:30 in the morning. But there's a big front, a cold front moving through at the moment, and so we don't have a huge amount of heat coming our way during the course of today. And you can see the grass is very long, and that's because we're in the summer and we've had a lot of rain, which is always a blessing out here. We never complain about rain in Africa. Well, that's not true, but we shouldn't complain about rain in Africa. Let's keep going. We're going to go past these Impala. We don't have too long left on our little sort of morning safari, if you like, or for you afternoon safari. And we'll just see if we can't quickly find you an elephant. You'd think an elephant would be easy to find, given how big they are, but they're not always. Let's just have one last look at these Impala, because they're standing very close to us and they're being very, what we call, confiding. In other words, they're not worrying too much about us being around. Now, they are much more nervous of people than the cats are, but they're much less nervous of us in the car than when we are on foot. Ollie, you're wondering about the scientific name of the species of antelope and deer. Ollie, we don't get deer here. Okay, there are no deer in Africa at all. It is only antelope that we get in Africa. There are a couple of deer that have been imported, but we don't get any naturally occurring deer. The Latin name of this particular antelope, the Impala, is Apceros melampus. Apceros melampus. I'm not going to give you all the other 9 Latin names, probably because I can't remember them all, but also because I don't think you'll remember them. Because I can't remember them. Adam, you've asked a very good question, actually. You say, why, as the sun comes out, why is it that the Impala wag their tails like a helicopter? Well, they don't really. They're just wagging them from side to side. And the point of that is that we think to remove ticks. Now, ticks, I don't know if you know what ticks are, but they're arachnids. In other words, they're related to spiders. And they are bloodsuckers. And we think that those black stripes that you can see there on the Impala are a little bit warmer than the rest of the body, so they radiate a bit more heat. And we think the ticks might be attracted to that area, and then the Impala will wag its tail and the ticks will be thrown down to the ground. Because ticks, of course, apart from being bloodsuckers, also transfer disease. So they transfer various parasites to the animals out here. Right, we have something else out here that is very desperate to get rid of ticks, and I'll let him tell you about that.
Definitely one of my least favorite things, along with flies, are ticks. But it's the price you pay for being in a wilderness like we are at the moment, and a little bit of blood donated to Africa's soil is always a guarantee that you're going to see something spectacular. And that is exactly what we do out here, is look at things that are spectacular. Now, today seems to be a bit of a dung day. This is an old pile of elephant dung, and in it you'll notice a bunch of these seeds. Now, most of these seeds, in actual fact, have been emptied out. These are the seeds of a marula, and most of them have been emptied out by squirrels. So this is how the squirrels have been opening up the seeds to eat the contents thereof. Now, these seeds are delicious, and it's considered amongst a lot of the local tribe around here, the Shangaan people, or the local tribe of people that live in this particular area, that to receive a packet full of marula seeds is a sign of friendship. And so what happens is you have these tokens of friendship given over to people throughout the summertime. And I'm going to see if I can open up one of these seeds and share it with Rowan. These seeds, of course, come out of the bottom of an elephant. This is elephant dung. The elephants ate the marulas and then left. Now, Kuleka, you've asked me, won't I get sick from eating elephant dung? Now, I'm going to tell you that it's probably a bad idea. It is a bad idea to put any type of dung in your mouth. So please don't do that. Let's just start there. Could I get sick from eating elephant dung? Yes, I suppose I could. I've been doing it for so many years though, Kuleka. I think by now, if I was going to get sick from eating elephant dung, I would have already been sick. So see what I've done? I've taken my knife and I've put it into the cap. And now I'm lifting up the cap to expose the seed. There's the seed on the inside there, and we're going to dig it out now. So now I look for a stick. Grind the stick down in your teeth. Scrape off the covering, because that is a bit hard and woody. It's not too nice. There you can see that beautiful white seed that's on the inside there. And then what you do is you take your stick and you stick it into the side. And, oh no, I broke my stick off. Oh, tragedy. Now I'm going to have to do it again. Alright, so, hang on, wait, maybe I've got a multi-tool here, you know. Being an ex-Boy Scout, I have a few of these things in my arsenal here. And there we go. Let's use one of them right now. Flies today are insane. Alright, so let's dig it out. The seed, there you go. So that's the seed on the inside, and then you can take it and pop it into your mouth. So I'm going to have one, and I'm going to save my friend Rowan some. He's on camera today, so I'll save him some. That's quite good. Tastes very almondy, so it has an almondy flavor, but an oily almond flavor. Now, the oil from the marula nuts has been turned into an essential oil that you can wipe onto your skin to give it some good moisturizing things. And obviously, it's good for your skin because of that. So lots of vitamin E is good for the skin. Now, Ollie, you've asked me what are the most common trees in this area of the Kruger National Park. Ollie, it's nice that where we're sitting at the moment, we can actually see some of them right now. So this marula fruit, or the nut, the fruit is about this big that comes around it. That came from the marula tree. That big tree that's sitting there in the background, that's a marula tree. That is one of the most common trees in the Kruger National Park. And a tree like that will produce upwards of 500 kilograms of fruit per year. Now, it's just finished the fruiting season. Unfortunately, we always are quite sad when the marula fruiting season is finished, because we spend about a month over here just eating marulas like crazy. But at least for the next couple of months, we'll be able to root through elephant dung like this and pick out the nuts and the seeds as well. Now, another quite interesting tree or common tree that we found out here is this tree. This is a beautiful example of a silver cluster leaf tree. That is another very common tree that we find around here. Very hard wood, used in making of implement handles, things like axe handles, and lots of farming equipment is made from the wood of this tree, including the support structures for homes that are built with wood. So they make a very good wood for homes. Let's see if we can see another very common tree. This low down bush that you see right here, that is a jackalberry tree. That is the largest tree that we find in the Kruger Park, and not the largest, it's one of the largest, in the top 5 of the biggest trees in the Kruger Park. That's obviously a baby one, but they grow to easily double the height of the marula tree that is next to it on the right. Now, another common tree that we find over here is that peltiforum tree over there. That is the African weeping wattle. We find that tree out here. That tree, you can use it to treat coughs and colds. The root, you can also make nice bedding. So if you were to sleep out here in the bush for a night, you need to insulate yourself from the cold ground. It's that tree that you pick the leaves from, and basically you can use that to keep yourself nice and warm. All right, we're going to carry on and find something else interesting to show you over the next couple of minutes. And in the meantime, we're going to send you over to James, who's found another type of antelope.
We've got a very special treat for you, everybody. We've got a hyena mother and her 2 tiny little cubs. They're only about 8 weeks old, we think. And there they are, suckling from their mum just as the sun comes out. Isn't that special? Look at them, they're tiny little beautiful things. Isn't that gorgeous? Now, hyenas, I think, are one of the most special animals in the world. People will tell you that they are dastardly scavengers and that they sort of don't deserve to live because they steal food from others. It's just not true. They do a lot of hunting on their own. And if you were to see how, well, they're very cute, of course, but they also spend a lot of time looking after each other. They have a very sophisticated social structure where it's actually a female-dominated social structure, which is quite unusual for the animal kingdom. And that's a female there, and her 2 little babies. Isn't that nice? And they're just suckling on the milk there. And all around the wind is blowing still, beautiful summer sunshine. And so that's going to be it, of course, from us for this little safari that we've been on. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope that you had a good time there at school, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your school day. Until next time, bye-bye.
Well, we're back with you. We've said goodbye to our schools as you saw there with James, and for the next couple of minutes of the show, you're going to be with us, well, next couple of minutes, the next 45 minutes of the show. We've got quite a lot of it left. Now, we are ambling around on top of quarantine, myself and Rowan, mainly because we were picking up a bit of a freeze frame thing with the backpack, which seems to have sorted itself out, but for safety's sake, we're going to be just rolling around or roaming around on top of quarantine clearings just in case we need to get our tech geniuses out here to come and figure out what's going on. But for now, you're with us, and we are going to be making circuits of the open area, and I am on my way to my favorite termite mound on Djuma. And it's my favorite because it's so active, and I'm going to go and see what's happened to it. I haven't visited this particular termite mound for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think, probably close on a month and a half now. And I'm looking forward to seeing how big it's gotten now that it's summertime and the termites are going to be all active. I want to see how big the chimney is, and we're going to go through there now. That's what we're going to be doing, and showing you basically what it is. Then I'm going to be looking for as far as I know, the most toxic plant that we have over here, the Abrus precatoriae, and that I'm hoping to find you before you are finished with the safari with me today. In the meantime, why don't we send you back over to James and those hyena cubs.
Okay, let me move forward. The hyenas have just moved off, everyone, and please remember now, of course, this is back to being a non-school drive, so hashtag Safari Live is how you get hold of us. I thought maybe the mum was moving off and the cubs would go back inside, but they haven't. They've just moved around here, so I'm going to move very slowly. I can still hear the little ones making a big noise. And Wild Bill, what a wonderful name you have. You say, are there any scavengers that are, or any animals that are scavengers only? They're in here. Yes, certainly birds, definitely. There we are. Vultures are scavengers almost entirely, exclusively. That is very irritating. So vultures, what I would describe as being completely scavengers, well, bar the leopard-faced, which has been recorded killing every so often. Mammals, I don't know. No, I don't think that there are any that would scavenge almost exclusively, but certainly, I mean, a brown hyena and a striped hyena would probably do less hunting than a spotted hyena. But it's a continuum, you know, it's not a sort of one or the other situation. That's not great, is it? Let's go around the other side there. What else would there be? I mean, there are obviously plenty of insects that are scavengers only. Dung beetles come to mind. And of course, when we ask about animals, we often mean mammals, without realizing that we're referring to an entire kingdom of creatures. We're just going to move very slowly around here and try not to make too much noise. I'm not sure how much of a view we're going to have from the side of the mound. We may have to go all the way round. Yeah, I think we're going to have to go all the way around. There's a big stick in front here which we could push over, but I think that would disturb the hyenas and I think they'll disappear inside if we do that. So I'm afraid we're just going to be patient. I'm going to reverse slowly round the whole mound. So much fun to reverse. Now Stefan, of course, he's a very clever man, and I say that because he sets himself the objective to find something that he knows is already there, and that is the cleverest kind of guide. Let's go and find out what it is that he knew was there.
I don't quite know whether to swear at James or to say thank you, but since he's my friend, I'm going to say thank you and forget about that comment. I have found the termite mound, the object of my objective, and yes, it is static because it's a termite mound. It was never going to go anywhere to start with, but it's been fully open now. So now have a look at the inside of this chimney. Many of you would be familiar with this termite mound. I did visit it in winter, and this winter they covered this entire piece and left, well, literally for most of winter they covered the entire chimney, but last year, to avoid escaping moisture, only a little portion, about as big as my fist, of this chimney was open. But come and have a look this year at the size of this chimney now. That's the widest I've ever seen this particular chimney on this termite mound, and the heat coming out of this is just unbelievable. This, if you've baked cookies and open the oven and let the oven cool down for a bit, when you can stick your hand into the oven, that's what it feels like. It really is warm. Now, of course, the temperature in here is 31 degrees. It's between 30 and 31 degrees, the temperature of this termite mound. What is that in Fahrenheit? Probably about 80 degrees Fahrenheit is 30 degrees centigrade, although I would like some help on that, of course, so feel free to use the hashtag Safari Live and just let me know what 31 degrees centigrade is in Fahrenheit, because that is exactly what I'm feeling here now. And on a day that's windy and blustery like it is now, where the temperature is probably in the low 70s, when you've got something in the mid or low 80s, it's significant. And what does it smell like? And that's another one of my favorites. Without getting bitten in the face by a black mamba, to cup my hand over this, just smell it. It's the most unbelievable smell. Termite mound is just a big air conditioner for a farm. They are fungus farms. The termites themselves collect grass and plant material and farm fungus, which they then eat. So the termites eat the fungus, and they are very good at farming fungus, particular type of fungus. It lives inside these termite mounds. And when you smell the top of a termite mound like this, it smells like wet clay, rain, fungus, a little bit of fungus, a little bit of rotting wood and grass and vegetation. It's just such a fantastic smell. One of my most favorite smells. Now, because this termite mound is open like this, of course, the opportunity for feeding on termites exists, and there are signs everywhere that birds have been waiting. So have a look at this. Here we have the droppings of a bird that is sitting here and basically waiting for the termites to come out and then collecting the termites. Now, Justin S., you've asked me an interesting question. Can you bake bread in the inside of a termite mound? Yes, you can. I'm going to tell you how now. It wouldn't work if you just put the bread over this. It's too cold. So this is only 30 degrees centigrade, and even if you opened it a little bit and covered it again, you won't get much hotter than 30 degrees centigrade. But termite mounds make for fantastic ovens. And all over Africa, you see evidence of people mining termite mounds. They mine them for the clay, but they make bricks out of the clay, and then they use the oven, the hole, the cavity where they mine the clay as the oven, the kiln, to fire the bricks. And there's the answer to the question there, in that if you were to excavate this termite mound and you were to build a kiln, you absolutely would be able to build a fire in there, bank up the coals, put your bread in, and probably make quite a nice bread.
Well, today everybody, we're going to be burning the bushwalk backpack as a, well, sort of an objection to how utterly pathetically it's performed this morning. Luckily these hyenas are performing in a far better fashion, and we're enjoying them thoroughly. And if you listen carefully, you can hear them calling there. It's a little bit like listening to a child with an unbroken voice, because eventually that voice that they've got now, which is a kind of, well, rasping squeak if you like, is going to be a very powerful voice that sends whooping, echoing whoops into the night, and those sort of scary cackling laughs that have given the hyenas their fearsome reputation. Now, one of the reasons that she's come off to live here, as I've said before, is that she's low ranking, we think. But it's interesting that often lower ranking cubs get less milk than higher ranking ones, and you think, but why is that the case? They don't cross suckle their youngsters, so it's not like a higher ranking female's cubs would try and suckle from her. It's because she will eat less and therefore will produce less milk. And so it really is to her advantage to get away from the main den during the course of this process, or this period, that initial sort of, what do they call it, early development or so that the cubs can get as much to eat as possible, and she can have the space to move around and catch as much as she can on her own without the competition of the rest of the clan, while still sort of taking advantage of the protection, of course, being offered by the clan or being in their territory. Now, Aaron, you're wondering at what age they're going to leave the den. Well, they're going to leave the den probably, I wouldn't be surprised if they left fairly soon to go and try and find the main den, wherever that may be. Nobody knows where that is at the moment. It's normally 6 weeks at a time at a den. I think these chaps are about 8 weeks old. I think they were born in the den not far from here, on elephant carcass that Herbert found that one morning when we were on foot. We saw a lot of activity going in and out of there. Pretty sure it must have been this female, and I think she then moved these cubs over here. Let's just try and look behind their tails there and see if they in fact look exactly the same, or if they're obviously different at all. So I don't think it's too long from now that they will move away from this den. Well, you see, Naturable, yes indeed, they are starting to get spots. You say, are they getting spots? Yes, they are. Now, it was my understanding that that process began at roughly 6 weeks, but because I've got my very fancy new mammal application, which includes accounts of such oddities as the golden mole, let's just have a look-see here. I'm just going to quickly read to check whether or not I'm right. It actually doesn't say the age here. It says juveniles uniformly black to dark brown at birth, but soon develop pale fur with clear dark spotting, which is progressively lost with age. Yeah, and I think it's about 6 weeks or so. And so I would put these guys at 7 to 8 weeks. And they grow relatively slowly to start with, and eventually that sort of growth will speed up. But they suckle for a huge amount of time in comparison with most. Almost a year. It's turning into a beautiful morning. Nice breeze blowing, sun's out. And, you know, there's an aeroplane in the background, and so often, I don't know, the sound of a sort of propeller aeroplane in the distance is reminiscent of sort of warm, still childhood afternoons, so I always like it. And when I move to the bush, of course, it means that there are guests coming in or guests going out. And I often think to myself how utterly magnificent it must be to land on an aeroplane in an area like this for the first time. How romantic it must be to fly in to enjoy this quite astounding environment. Yes, I'm afraid the best I can do for you is about 6 weeks. Oh, look at that. That is very sweet. Well, we're not going to go anywhere from here. I'm going to do a little bit more research on the spotting. And while I do that, Stefan van der Moer would like to do some geometry with you.
This is an interesting piece of geometry, this that I'm going to show you. Here's an elephant track. It is the front foot of an elephant, a fairly large elephant.
I think Stef should just go and have breakfast. Now, while I was doing my little bit of reading here, the last time I was here we had a long discussion about the existence, well, we were talking about the pseudopenis, of course, which is that enlarged clitoris that a female hyena has, and then somebody asked the question about whether a pseudo-vagina exists in nature, which I said no, I didn't think it did. And I've just seen here, we then went on to discuss, you know, what other animals have got this sort of enlarged, or that sort of situation. What's interesting, though, is that they aren't the only ones. And I've just read that now. Squirrel monkeys, female spider monkeys, also have enlarged clitoris, but they don't have the same situation where they give birth through and urinate through the clitoris like this in spotted hyenas. So they are the only species that have that. It's quite astounding. Alright, let me just keep scrolling through this. And if you are wondering, I'm going to tell you what the app is. It's called the Smithers Mammals of the Southern African Sub-region, and it is a comprehensively magnificent tome. And I know I'm not supposed to do any advertising, but these are starving academics who've written this book, and it really is the quintessential Southern African mammal text. If you ever want to know about animals from here, this is the good one. Because it was written by starving academics, I don't mind giving them a bit of a sort of a punt, if you like. No, it doesn't say anything about when they start losing their spots. We've definitely seen it though over the years, or certainly over the months that we've been around these hyenas. I mean, we've watched little hyenas being born, and yeah, 6 weeks or so they start losing it on the head. I also, of course, have lost everything on my head too, and they don't lose their hair, they just use the darkness and they go spotter. Let's just have one last look there. Cody, I missed your question, I'm afraid. Can I have it again, please, Rebecca? Oh, Cody, you say are females bigger than males? Yes, absolutely. They're probably about 10% larger. In fact, I'll give you the exact sort of weight range. Big female about 70 kilograms or so. So you can multiply that by 2.2 if you want to find out the imperial form. And I will tell you that, you see, it's interesting that what was so great about this app that I'm using, yes, females roughly 70 kilograms, males, yeah, about 10% smaller, they're about 63 kilograms or so. I'm glad I got that right. You know, it's a long time since I've actually read these figures. But what's interesting here is you'll read that in a number of texts, but they won't tell you how many animals they've measured to get those measurements. And obviously, because they're wild animals, it can't be a lot of them. So, for example, that mass that I gave you, which is from the Kruger National Park, that's only from 11 individuals. So it's the average of 11 individuals. And with the females, the range is from 55 to 81. So, I mean, some of the females can get up to 81 kilos. And because it's only a sample of, in fact, 9 individuals, oh, look, this is wonderful. It gives you the impression, of course, that, I mean, that's a minute proportion of the population. So, yeah, let's say 70 odd kilos, but it could easily be 75 as the average. It could easily be 65 as the average. Oh, this is just fantastic. Look at this. Going on a little exploratory mission. Are you enjoying the exploratory mission, Craig? Yeah. It's pretty cool. Now for Craig, I mean, that basically, when Craig says something is pretty cool, he basically means that he's never been more excited in all his days. I think that's wonderful. They're so cute. And you can easily see why Jamie, for example, finds these her very favorite animals. Right, I'm very excited to say that we're going to go over to Stef now for his geometry lesson, which will hopefully last longer than 3 nanoseconds this time.
Let's hold thumbs, it lasts longer than 3 seconds at least anyway. So the idea here is that there's a theory in being able to extrapolate the height of an elephant's shoulder from using their front foot track. So here we have the track of an elephant, the front foot of an elephant, a big elephant, and I've circled the circumference of the elephant track, and I've gone to go get myself some bark rope, and I'm going to put the rope in the track. Now I didn't get enough rope. So there is a patch about a handspan, just bigger than a handspan, bigger than this piece of rope. So let's see if we can get the height of this elephant. So from its foot to there, plus a handspan, and it's 3.5 times the circumference of an elephant's foot. So there we go. So here we have the projected height of that elephant is from here at his shoulder. I'll take roughly about a meter step, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Can it be? Did I do enough? 1, 2, 3.5. Yeah, it is. Gee whiz. I don't think it works that. 1, 2, 3, almost 4 meters at the shoulder. I don't think that that's true, to be honest with you. So I'm going to discount this theory that the height of an elephant's shoulder is 3.5 times the circumference of its front foot, based on this elephant's track and my very sophisticated measuring device, and my finger, of course. So I don't think that it's that. I think it's probably a little bit less than that. Although this is a big elephant, elephants do get to around about 3.5 meters at the shoulder. This particular elephant was probably close to that, but not 4 meters. I doubt that very much, unless it was an incredibly rangy giraffe with elephant with very, very big feet. So I don't think that that's the case at all. All right, so we'll discount that little theory. I'm glad we tried it with you, and I'm glad that it lasted, the segment lasted. We seem to have a bit of a gremlin that has crept into this backpack, but we'll sort it out. We've got Anwar and Alex, the tech geniuses, the genii that we have at camp at the moment. I'm sure they'll sort it out, no problem. So now on to the second half of my quest on top of quarantine. I'm going to be looking for the Abrus precatoriae, the lucky bean creeper. And there's nothing lucky about this particular creeper. It packs probably the biggest poison per volume of any of the plants that I know of in this particular portion of the Kruger National Park, and I want to see if I can show you some, at least anyway. Now, Amber, you wanted to know if invasive plant species are a big problem in Africa. Amber, they are. I was lucky enough to be able to sit in a talk about alien invasive species, in particular alien invasive plants in South Africa and Southern Africa in general. And I never really realized, we don't see them here in the Kruger National Park. So there are a few. Lantana would be one, Mexican poppy would be another. But you don't see them, they're not that common. You'll find them, but they're not that common here. But there are places in South Africa and Southern Africa where invasive species of plants have taken over. And in some cases, these plants are actually poisonous to humans. They cause inflammation of the skin, they can cause eye irritations, and I never realized just the extent of some of these plants, how invasive they can be and how impactful they can be on communities. They can have a really, really detrimental effect on poor communities. And that's not even counting the cost of trying to eradicate these plants. So literally, just because of a slip up or a herbicide that wasn't applied correctly, a plant species can be introduced into an area that has no natural control mechanisms. There's no insect that eats that plant. There's no, the environment is conducive to it growing, and it'll spread like wildfire. And yes, so, you know, to answer your question shortly, yes, there's a problem with alien invasive plant species in Africa. I suppose the same as many continents, but there is very little alien invasive species actually inside the Kruger National Park, although you will find them if you look for them. Alrighty, why don't we send you back over to James and those hyena who are apparently having a bath.
I'm not sure you'd describe that as a bath, but yes, they're certainly having a bit of a wash, thankfully. Hyenas can tend to smelliness, and so it's always a good idea to have a little bit of a wash. And I must tell you that hyenas are, well, a hyena den site is often quite smelly, and it's very unlike the scentless kind of existence that lion cubs live. I remember lion cubs don't have the safety of a den like this, which means that their mothers have to keep them fastidiously clean so that they don't start smelling like rotting meat or fetid rancid milk. But if you stick your nose into that hyena den now, there's a very distinctive hyena-ish smell that I'm pretty sure other animals can pick up on. I mean, we're so lucky that we've spent this kind of time with them, I must say. I'm very glad Stef managed to give you his geography or his geometry lesson, and I must confess that theory that he was talking about, I have often considered myself to be, I've often thought to myself, I'm sure that can't be right. Isn't this amazing? Skip, aged just 11, from Texas. I know you've asked about our hyenas before, so it's great to have you asking questions. You say, what happens to the cubs when they meet the rest of the clan? Skip, life for them will probably not be as easy as it is now. Because their mother is not high-ranking, that means that she's not a sort of leader in the clan. It means that the cubs will fall into the hierarchy. Do you know what hierarchy means, Skip? I'm sure you do. It means kind of the order that they live in. A bit like, you know, when you're at school, you get guys who are older and sort of more higher up, if you like. The same happens here with the hyenas, and that means that when these cubs eventually go back to the dens with them, or meet the rest of the clan, they will fall into that hierarchy, which means they won't be very high ranking, and it means that they might be bullied a bit by older cubs, and they'll certainly be bullied by cubs that are higher ranking. They'll be okay, but life will be a bit harder for them. Now, if you're a high-ranking female and you give birth to high-ranking cubs, well, then your cubs are going to eat a lot more, and they're also not going to be bullied nearly as much. So Skip, yeah, look, they'll get used to it. It won't be, they're not going to go through life thinking, oh, how we've had such a tough time, but it will be difficult for them. Let's try and see if we can get one last look, and then we'll carry on. But I think they might come straight back here. I'm just watching the mum now. She might want to go off hunting, and therefore, or not hunting, foraging maybe, and therefore the cubs will go back into the hole. We'll try for one last look around the corner. Gosh, we've had a really nice morning, haven't we, with all of these predators. My luck has been tremendously poor over the last few days, and so to have had the leopards and the hyenas, great stuff. Tracks of lions around here as well, but where they've gone I don't know. And I'm going to move very carefully here. Oh, look. Now the little ones have now run straight back into the den site. I think that's probably because we came along here and Mum is just a little bit far away for them to be comfortable. I'm not going to move again because she's looking back towards them, almost indicating, that she might think about calling them out. But she might also go all foraging or go for a drink or something like that. She's young, That's not a big hyena. Oh, they're calling her. They're not putting their heads out. Let's see if she calls them back. Isn't it interesting? She's had the same kind of reaction as a human mother would on hearing her own child call or cry. And she's just stopped there in the shade and she's looking back towards them. But instinctually, I think that they think she's too far away from the hole. They don't feel safe even with her there. I'm going to let this play out for another 2 minutes and then we're going to move away in case she does want to actually bring them out. But she's totally relaxed around us. What's so fascinating to me though is when you try and follow a hyena at night, when it is on the forage, like you might with a leopard or a lion, they are totally intolerant to vehicles. They run away. And yet around the den site like this, they are the most confiding of all the animals. Thank you very much, Craig, for that. Your click maybe needs to be a bit louder in the wind, otherwise the viewers are going to just get the back of my head. Okay, let's carry on from here. She's laying down in the shade there. I think we'll leave her there. And unsurprisingly, the bushwalk seems to be not functioning at the moment. Fascinating. Brian, the termite mound, as Stef I'm sure was sort of alluding to before his bushwalk backpack gave up, is used by almost countless numbers of animals. You say, what animals will use a termite mound for a den? Well, the most obvious ones, of course, the hyenas, and then wild dogs also use holes in termite mounds for dens. And then we go to aardvark. They're the ones that open up the termite mounds for everybody to start with. Then warthogs will use them, mongoose will use them, I've seen pygmy kingfishers nesting inside them, countless numbers of insects, many different snakes will use termite mounds for estivating and hibernating in, so they really are a great number. Now Stefan has managed to find something that is quite dangerous, and hopefully he won't eat, although with him you just never know.
I definitely won't be eating this, that's for sure. But we found our lucky bean creeper. This is it here. This is the Abrus precatoriae plant, and we've even found a flower on it, which is unusual because I've never seen the flower of an Abrus precatoriae, the lucky bean creeper. So for those of you who keep some records of truly interesting plants, this is it with the leaf structure. As you can see, it is a climbing species of plant. It grows out of a multi-stemmed base, basically, underneath the ground, and will crawl up these grass stalks, and will, in the beginning of summer, produce a seed pod with a red and black seed in it that's probably about as big as a peppercorn. And just one of those seeds, if you had to put it in your mouth and chew it, you need to break through the outer casing of the shell. Just one of those seeds is enough to kill a full-grown man. Isn't that impressive? So this, as far as I know, is the most dangerous plant that we have out here at Djuma Private Game Reserve. This is more dangerous than a lion in terms of, I suppose dead is dead, so how do you say is more dangerous than a lion? But yeah. Now, Hal, you've asked me how often has albinism in plants been observed. Hal, you can't, as far as I know, get albinism in plants. Albinism is when you have a lack of melanin in your cells. As far as I know, melanin is an animal-produced compound, and so only animals that produce melanin, or at least are able to produce melanin but don't produce melanin, can become albinos or show albinism. You can probably get plants with a lack of pigment. I don't know if it's melanin specific though. So albinism is restricted to the lack of melanin, not the lack of pigment in an animal, as far as I know. But I mean, please feel free, Hal, to educate me. I'm quite often astounded by how often you all out there teach us about our environment. The last was, and I have to say thank you to everybody that contributed to my knowledge increase here, was about the hum that giraffe make at night time. I never knew that giraffe made sounds at night, but it documented proof that giraffe make a low humming noise and have been. This has been recorded for many decades, of course, and I didn't know anything about it, so I just have to say thank you, back up the tube, so to say. Right back at you. So Hal, please inform me on albinism in plants if you can, using that hashtag Safari Life. Now, one thing that was surprisingly found at the base of this particular marula was the pupa of a lunar moth. You can see that this silvery, very finely woven, pockmarked cocoon is from an insect. This would have been spun by a caterpillar, and then out of it would have come the most beautiful moth. So the lunar moth. Finding one in its natural environment has been one of the things that I haven't been able to do in my career to date. So next summer we are going to carry on the search for one of these, not only the caterpillar but also the pupa with a lunar moth in it and a lunar moth in its natural environment. Now Nikki, you wanted to know from me what compounds are inside or what toxins are inside this lucky bean creeper. To be honest with you, Nikki, I can't really remember the answer to that question as I'm sitting here right now. I did read it literally a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know. I don't want to take a guess and just, fabricate a story for you. But definitely, if you'd like to do some research there, it's the Abris precatoriae, and you spell that the same way you say it, precatoriae, or the lucky bean creeper. And you will see it probably have a picture of the creeper itself, the vine, this compound leaf, bipinnately compound leaf that it has, and then a picture of the seed, which is about as big as a peppercorn, smooth, with a red cap and a black body. The Abris precatoriae. As far as I'm aware, the most dangerous plant that we have at Djuma Private Game Reserve in this part of the Kruger National Park. And there's quite a big creeper here. It extends quite some distance. So from this side all the way to this side of the tree. So nice. Now, Laura Mora, you wanted to know if there's any insect repellent plants out here. There absolutely are. I quite often use a plant that I'm hoping we can find some of, just so that I can show you. No, not around here anywhere. Come, let's go and have a look for some insect repellent plants that we use out here. Yes, you can use tambuti as an insect repellent. You can use Osmum canum as an insect repellent. You can use what else can you use out here? I've gone blank there for a moment. Anyway, there are a couple of plants that you can use absolutely as a insect repellent, and we quite often do on bushwalks, specifically for beating about our heads to get rid of flies and things like that. And it doesn't really work. I suppose just the vigorous nature of it works more so than anything else. Alright, let's see what else is in this. Very interesting. Watch out, you're going to get stuck on a branch. It's just we are standing, we've got a backpack on, and it stands probably about as tall as a bull giraffe elephant. Not quite that tall, but anyway, there's an aerial on it. Sometimes we get stuck on sticks like this as we go past. Alright, let's come to that time of the morning where I have to say goodbye. Unfortunately, we will be seeing you on Bushwalk again this afternoon. So from me, goodbye. Have a nice day wherever you are. You off to James to close the show.
The bushwalk backpack may be as tall as the bushwalk backpack may be as tall as a bull giraffe, but it is about as useful as an ice or as a freezer in an igloo. And we're going to have a serious word with it today. And indeed, I believe the Russian, the Indian, and Connor, well, Connor's not here, but the Russian and the Indian are both here. They're going to have serious words with it during the course of the morning, which has been a very good morning for those of us in vehicles, not so good for those of us in feet, on foot, I've lost my words entirely. We came up towards this area because Rexon did find the tracks of the Nkuhuma Pride around here sometime from last night, and gosh, I don't know where they've gone. It looks to me like they've headed back towards Arathusa and Simbambili, but we will follow up later this afternoon and see what's going on there and contact the guys at Arathusa and see if they didn't have some lion luck this morning. But I'm more than happy to spend my time with those two cubs. There are some lions on Bivelshoek, but I think that's the Torchwood Pride of 7 lionesses and 10 little cubs. Fantastic stuff. I hope they come around here at some stage. Oh, there's our last mammal for the day, Craig. the male impala about to come into his first rut. Unfortunately for him, he's going to have a little bit of a rough time because he's not quite yet old enough to be fighting for mating rights. You can tell that because his horn's just not wide enough. So he's just over 2 years old. He would have been born in end of November or beginning of December of 2014. So next year I think will probably be the first year that he will actually fight for mating rights. Let's just go to the corner here before I bid you all a fond farewell, so that you may go and get on with whatever it is that you're going to get on with. Probably quite a lot of sleeping. Shall stop just down here. There we go. Right, and your last sighting of the day is going to be of my favourite grass. There it is, some yellow thatching grass. Thank you very much for coming on our drive with us. It's been a good time. Beautiful leopards and hyenas, a slow start, but all of your wonderful conversation made it much easier as we began. We'll see you this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Okay? Bye-bye.